Beneath the twin moons of Veltheri Prime, a hush fell over the Colosseum as thousands of alien spectators turned their piercing, luminescent eyes toward the combatants in the arena's center. Stone columns, ancient and scarred from centuries of battle, stood sentinel around them, and banners bearing the sigil of the Veltheri Empire rippled in the artificial wind. The air carried the scent of ozone and iron, a reminder of the countless duels that had been fought and lost on these sands. Tonight, history would be written once more. Princess Zalvanna stood with her arms crossed, her violet-hued skin catching the pale glow of the moons. Adorned in intricate battle armor forged from organic alloys, she exuded a regal confidence, her stance loose yet primed for combat. Eyes like burning amber regarded her opponent with thinly veiled disdain. Is this what humanity calls a warrior? Her voice carried across the Colosseum, amplified by the hovering drones recording the spectacle. Commander Dane Varos did not flinch at the mockery. Encased in the matte black plating of Terran combat armor, he stood unmoving, an imposing figure in his full battle gear. His helmet's visor concealed his expression, but the slight tilt of his head betrayed amusement. Zalvanna clicked her tongue, circling him like a predator gauging its prey. Hiding behind a shell, I see. It is no wonder your kind relies on machines. Her sharp, elongated canines gleamed as she smirked. Perhaps without it, you are nothing. The crowd stirred, murmurs rippling through the stands. The Veltheri were a species bred for war, their bodies honed by centuries of evolutionary refinement. Strength, speed, and resilience were woven into their very biology. To them, armor was an admission of inferiority, a cage for the weak. Dane remained silent. He had encountered arrogance before, but there was something about the princess's absolute certainty that amused him. She was wrong. A deep voice boomed from the imperial balcony above, silencing the growing chatter. Begin. With the command issued, Zalvanna lunged. She moved with astonishing speed, crossing the distance in a blink, her blade flashing toward his chest. The crowd barely had time to register the attack before. Clang! Her weapon met resistance, sparking against Dane's gauntlet as he deflected it with effortless precision. The force of her strike would have crushed stone, yet he absorbed it without faltering. Zalvanna's eyes narrowed. Dane struck back, a calculated movement rather than brute force. His armored fist shot toward her, but she twisted away at the last second, her agility saving her from a direct hit. Sand swirled as she landed gracefully, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. She had not expected him to be fast. The audience roared its approval. The Veltheri reveled in combat, and though they held little regard for humans, they respected skill. Zalvanna's grip on her weapon tightened. She had assumed this would be a swift demonstration of her superiority, a reminder that despite humanity's growing presence in the galaxy, they remained lesser. Yet this Terran, clad in his mechanical exoskeleton, was still standing. Worse, he was toying with her. "You're holding back," she accused, eyes gleaming with challenge. Dane finally spoke, his voice even. "So are you." The words sent a ripple through the onlookers. It was an insult, a provocation, yet also an invitation. Zalvanna's smirk returned, sharper this time. Very well. If he wished to see her true power, she would oblige. She launched forward again, but this time she disappeared. A blur of movement, then impact. Dane skidded backward as her strike found its mark, the force staggering even through his reinforced armor. Systems recalibrated instantly, stabilizers compensating for the unexpected velocity of her attack. His HUD flashed warnings, noting the pressure exerted against his plating. His intrigue deepened. She was fast, not just enhanced. Asterisk augmented beyond natural limit star. Zalvanna did not let up. She became a storm, her form flickering in and out of view as she struck from multiple angles. Each hit came stronger, more precise, testing his defenses. Dane adapted quickly, shifting from defense to controlled counters. He anticipated her moves, reading the minute shifts in her posture, the tells in her footwork. Yet for all her strength, She was predictable. A feint. Then he caught her wrist mid-strike. Zalvanna's breath hitched as he halted her momentum with one hand. The crowd fell into stunned silence. Dane could feel the tension in her muscles, the raw power coiled within her frame. But in that moment, realization dawned in her golden eyes. He wasn't struggling. In a deliberate motion, he released her and stepped back, unharmed. You think power is in speed alone? His voice carried through the arena. You rely on your biology, your birthright. But strength isn't something given. It's something earned. She bared her teeth. And you think wrapping yourself in steel makes you strong? Dane chuckled. A low, knowing sound. He tapped the side of his helmet, and with a soft hiss, the locks disengaged. The armor retracted, plating folding away, revealing the man beneath. Gasps rippled through the stands. Princess Zalvanna's confident expression wavered as she took in the sight before her. Dane Varos was no fragile Terran hiding within his shell. His body was a testament to war, a form carved by discipline, enhanced beyond human limitation. Scars traced his skin like battle-worn maps, each telling a story of survival. The way he moved, the sheer presence he exuded, was something no armor could grant. He rolled his shoulders, stepping forward with a casual ease that sent a chill through Zalvanna's core. You misunderstand, Princess, he said, voice steady. The armor isn't my strength. It's just a tool. His gaze locked onto hers, steady and unyielding. I am the weapon. Silence held the arena captive. For the first time in her life, Zalvanna had no words. Zalvanna's breath stalled as she took in the man before her. This was not the fragile, unremarkable being she had expected to find beneath the armor. Dane Varos stood with a confidence that needed no exoskeleton to bolster it. His physique, though human, was honed beyond natural limits. Muscles sculpted by war coiled with controlled power. His stance as solid as any Velthari warrior. His skin bore scars, not the delicate tissue of the weak, but the hardened reminders of survival. Each one a testament to battles fought and won. But more than that, there was something in his eyes. A knowing, a weight, a presence that spoke of countless struggles, of pushing beyond what his body should have allowed. The Colosseum was deathly silent. Zalvanna's fingers twitched at her sides, her mind working to rationalize what she saw. She had been certain, utterly certain, that humans relied on their technology to stand among the stars. She had seen their warships, their weapons, their machines that turned the tides of battle. But the being standing before her, bare-skinned under the cold Velthari moonlight, was not relying on anything at all. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Zalvanna's voice, when it finally came, was not the mocking taunt she had intended. You believe this makes you my equal? Dane tilted his head slightly, as if amused by the question. I never needed to be your equal, he said. I needed to be better. The words ignited something sharp within her. A flicker of anger, of insult. He thought himself above her, stripped of his technology, standing vulnerable beneath the eyes of the Velthari. He still dared to believe in his superiority? Her lip curled. Then prove it. She moved. This time, she held nothing back. Lightning shot through her veins as her muscles coiled and released with bio-enhanced precision. She struck low, then high, feinting in two directions at once, her speed pushing the very limits of what her body could endure. No more testing, no more restraint. She would drive him into the dirt, force him to understand the raw power of her kind. But Dane was not where she expected him to be. The moment her strike should have landed, he was already moving, sidestepping with inhuman precision. Not dodging, not scrambling, anticipating. Her second strike came with full force, the air cracking with the velocity of her movement. And then, impact. Not against him, against the ground. He was faster. A realization hit her like a thunderclap. It wasn't just strength. It wasn't just speed. It was calculation. Every move she made, every feint, every strike, he was reading her, adjusting, responding before she had even committed. A flicker of unease sparked in her gut. She had trained since childhood in the art of war. She had fought, bled, and conquered warriors who had been bred for nothing but battle. And yet this human, unarmored, unprotected, unafraid, was avoiding her with a precision that defied logic. She pivoted, driving a knee toward his ribs, but he caught it, midair, twisting her momentum against her. She barely managed to break free, flipping backward into a low crouch. Her breaths came sharp and uneven. Dane exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off a warm-up. "I thought you wanted to fight," he mused. A growl curled in her throat, and she launched herself at him again, this time abandoning form in favor of sheer aggression. If skill and precision would not break him, she would drown him in force. Their bodies became a blur of motion, strikes and counters exchanged in brutal succession. Sand kicked up around them as the force of their battle shook the Colosseum floor. The crowd, once stunned into silence, erupted into an electrified frenzy. Yet no matter how hard she pushed, he met her, matched her, and, slowly, Asterisk began to outpace her. Asterisk. She felt it before she wanted to acknowledge it. The creeping, undeniable truth. She was breathing harder than he was. Her muscles, though superior to any human's, burned. He was still steady, still standing. How? Her mind grasped for explanations, but none came. This was not how the story was supposed to go. He should have been broken by now, gasping for air, struggling to keep up. But instead, he caught her neck strike mid-swing, twisting her wrist just enough to unbalance her. Before she could react, his foot hooked around her ankle, sweeping her off her feet. She hit the ground. Hard. A sharp gasp tore from her throat as the impact sent shockwaves through her frame. A heartbeat later, he was above her, pinning her in a single, fluid motion. His forearm pressed lightly, just lightly against her throat, enough to prove a point but not enough to hurt her. The fight was over. Zalvanna lay still beneath him, panting, heart hammering against her ribs. Not once in her life had she been overpowered. Not once had she been bested in single combat. Yet here she was, pinned, defeated, and all around them, the Velthari, her people, her warriors, watched in stunned silence. Dane held her gaze, his own unreadable. Then, slowly, he released her, stepping back. He offered a hand. The gesture made something hot coil in her chest. Not humiliation, not anger, something else. He had won, and yet he was not gloating, not boasting. He was simply offering. Her pride screamed at her to refuse, to rise on her own, to deny the outcome. But her body did not move. Her mind could not form the words. The truth had settled too deeply. Everything she had believed about humans, about herself, had cracked. Dane spoke, his voice steady. Your kind believes strength is in what you are born with. What evolution has gifted you? He extended his hand slightly further, his expression unreadable. Humans don't have that luxury. We aren't given strength. We take it. Zalvanna's fingers twitched. For the first time in her life, she hesitated. Zalvanna's fingers hovered over Dane's outstretched hand. The weight of the moment pressed against her, heavier than any blow she had taken in the fight. Accepting his help meant acknowledging what had just transpired. Not just her defeat, but the deeper truth beneath it. The crowd still held its breath, waiting, watching. And so, with measured intent, she ignored his hand and pushed herself up on her own. Dane didn't seem surprised. He only let his arm fall back to his side, his expression unreadable. Zalvanna exhaled, schooling her features into careful neutrality, though her body still thrummed with the aftershock of battle. Never had she been pushed like this. Never had she been made to question what she thought was undeniable. Her people were superior, stronger, faster, more resilient. They did not lose. She did not lose. Yet here she stood, humbled by a human. The silence of the arena cracked as movement stirred from the imperial balcony above. The High Warlord, her father, stepped forward. His presence alone was enough to command the attention of all gathered. His towering form, adorned in ceremonial battle armor, cast a long shadow over the Colosseum floor. His gaze fell upon Zalvanna, first measuring, assessing. Then it shifted to Dane. You have done what no other has, the High Warlord said, his voice resonating like rolling thunder. You have bested my daughter in combat." The words were not spoken with anger, nor with disappointment. They were merely fact, but the weight of them settled into Zalvanna's chest like a stone. Dane did not bow, did not preen under the recognition. He merely inclined his head. "She is a formidable warrior." The High Warlord studied him, his expression inscrutable. Then he turned his gaze back to his daughter. "And you, Zalvanna, what have you learned?" The question was meant to cut, to probe beneath the surface of what had just occurred. Zalvanna set her jaw. The easy answer was one of defiance, to claim that it had been a fluke, that Dane had only won through trickery or chance. It would be simple to dismiss, to let her pride shield her from the truth. But she could not when she could still feel the weight of his hold, the way he had read her. Not when she had looked into his eyes and seen the years of struggle, of relentless, disciplined willpower that had forged him into what he was. She exhaled, steady, that we have underestimated them. A murmur rippled through the crowd. She felt the weight of their shock, their disbelief. The Velthari did not admit weakness. They did not concede fault. And yet, here she was, saying aloud what could not be denied. Her father watched her for a long moment before he gave a slow nod. "Good." The single word held more meaning than any elaborate speech. Dane shifted slightly, his attention never wavering. He was waiting, not just for what would happen next, but for her. A flicker of something unfamiliar coiled in her chest. Before she could decipher it, her father turned back toward the gathered audience, raising a hand for silence. "Let it be known," he declared, "that the Velthari do not turn from truth. We do not shrink from what challenges us. We face it. We evolve." He looked at Dane then, a slow, assessing glance. "And we do not ignore warriors who prove their worth." A fresh hush fell over the Colosseum. The meaning was clear. This was not just recognition. This was an invitation. Zalvanna's eyes flicked toward Dane, gauging his reaction. He remained composed, but she did not miss the sharp glint of understanding in his expression. "I assume this is more than just an acknowledgement of victory," he said. The High Warlord nodded. "You have earned a place among us if you would take it." Zalvanna felt something twist in her gut at the words. This was unheard of. No outsider had ever been offered such an honor. To be welcomed into the warrior ranks of the Velthari was not a gesture made lightly. It was a bond forged in battle, a right of trust and respect. And it was his choice now. She did not know what she wanted his answer to be. Dane was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, it was slow, deliberate. "I didn't come here seeking a place," he said. "I came to prove that humans are not to be dismissed, that we are not just creatures of steel and machines." He looked at Zalvanna then, and she felt her pulse quicken. "But I also came to test myself, and I found something worth learning." Her breath caught, though she did not understand why. Dane turned back to the High Warlord. "I will accept your offer, on one condition." A flicker of intrigue passed through the warlord's gaze. "And that is?" Dane glanced once more at Zalvanna, his lips curving slightly. "She trains me herself." A fresh ripple of shock coursed through the crowd, but Zalvanna hardly heard it. Dane had bested her, had defeated her in combat, proven his strength. And yet, he sought her instruction. It was not an insult. It was something else entirely. A challenge, a recognition, a bridge between them that had not existed before this battle. Her father looked at her. Well, Zalvanna felt the weight of choice settle over her. She could refuse, could say that he had already proven himself and had no need for further instruction. But deep down, she knew better. She had felt it in their battle. The way he fought, the way he adapted, the way he learned. He was not Velthari, but he was something else entirely. And she wanted to know how far he could go. She stepped forward, standing tall before him. "Very well," she said, voice steady. "But do not expect me to go easy on you." Dane smiled just slightly. "I wouldn't have it any other way." The training began at dawn. Zalvanna stood on the high cliffs overlooking the endless sprawl of the Velthari war barracks. The sky burned with the amber glow of the rising suns, casting long shadows across the jagged terrain. Below, soldiers drilled in formation, the rhythmic clash of weapons against armor creating a steady pulse of sound. But her focus was not on them. It was on the human standing before her. Dane had discarded his old armor. He wore the simple combat leathers of a Velthari initiate, his battle-worn skin exposed to the elements. His expression remained unreadable, though she could see the sharp attentiveness in his stance, the subtle tension of a man ready to move at any moment. She had expected hesitation, regret, perhaps even a flicker of doubt, but he had none. He was ready. "You do not yet understand what it means to be Velthari," she told him, voice steady. "Strength is not enough. Endurance is not enough. The mind must be sharpened as much as the blade." Dane held her gaze. "Then sharpen me." She had no intention of making this easy. Without another word, she struck. Her fist shot forward, fast and unrelenting. He dodged, narrowly, but she was already moving, spinning low and sweeping his legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard, dust pluming into the air. He exhaled sharply, but to his credit, he didn't hesitate. He rolled, sprang to his feet, and reset his stance. Zalvanna didn't let up. She lunged again, each strike pushing him, forcing him to move faster, react quicker. He was skilled, there was no denying that. But she could see it, the human limitations, the strain in his muscles as he fought to keep up. Yet he never faltered, never wavered. She pressed harder. Hours passed, the suns climbing higher, scorching down on them both. Sweat slicked their skin, breaths turned ragged, but neither backed down. The world around them faded. There was only movement, impact, and the unspoken challenge between them. And slowly, she began to see it. Dane wasn't just enduring. He was adapting. Every time she struck, he learned. Every time she exploited a weakness, he corrected it. He wasn't merely following her lead. He was pushing against it, refining himself in real time. For the first time, she felt something dangerous stir in her chest. By nightfall, they stood across from each other, panting, exhaustion pressing on their shoulders like a heavy mantle. The cliffs were bathed in silver light, the air cooling as the twin moons ascended. Dane wiped a trickle of blood from his lip, smirking faintly. "You're not holding back." She met his gaze, something unreadable in her own. "I never do." The words hung between them. Then, slowly, she stepped forward, closing the distance between them. The heat of battle still lingered in the air, but beneath it was something else, something neither of them had spoken aloud. "You're unlike any human I've met," she admitted, voice quiet but firm. Dane studied her, eyes searching. "And you're unlike any Velthari I expected." A breeze swept between them, carrying the scent of the wild plains below. They stood in silence, the weight of everything that had transpired pressing against them. The battle, the realization, the undeniable shift between them. Zalvanna had never considered a human her equal, never believed one could stand beside her, not as a soldier, not as a warrior. And yet, Dane Varos had done more than that. He had changed something within her. The night stretched on, and neither of them moved. They had fought, tested each other, broken the barriers between their kinds. And in the quiet between them now, something new had begun.